Welcome to the next chapter in the book. We're on chapter 8, Through the Skirting Board. For a full minute, Fritz spun around in circles, shouting, "Ah!" hoping that would make his new tail go away. It didn't, so eventually he stopped. "Why have I got a tail?" he cried, and as he said it, the tip of his nose turned bright pink, like a mouse's. Clara and Walter gasped as Fritz crossed his eyes to look at his new rosy nose. He groaned. "A pink nose and a tail," he wailed. "I can't go about with a tail. I'll have to cut holes in all my trousers." He threw his hands up in despair, but as he did, he said, "Ouch!" and rubbed his arm. It wasn't the one he'd pinched earlier, but the other one. He pushed up his sleeve and revealed a red mark just by his elbow. Clara and Walter rushed over to look. "Oh, Fritz, you've been bitten," exclaimed Clara. She gently held his arm and she examined the angry mark closely. She was very worried. "I bet the Mouse King got you before I biffed him with my slipper." "Oh dear," said Walter, aghast. "Mouse magic. It can only mean one thing." "What?" said Clara and Fritz together. "You're turning into a mouse," said Walter. Fritz's bottom lip started to tremble. "But I don't want to be a mouse," he cried. "I don't like cheese." Then he started to cry. Clara put her arm around him and patted him comfortingly on the shoulder. Inside her tummy twisted and turned again, very anxiously. "Can't you do anything?" she said to Walter, but he looked glum. "I can't do any magic at all. I'm just a Nutcracker," he said, sadly shaking his head. "And that's some very strong magic to untangle." This news made Fritz sob louder. "But," said Walter, thinking very hard, "the sugar plum fairy could fix it. I just know he could." A number of expressions crossed his face: concern, nervousness, confusion. Then he took a deep breath, pulled his uniform straight and fixed his hat. He held out his hand to Fritz. "Come on," he said. "We'll have to go tin now. We haven't a moment to lose." "Why?" snuffled Fritz. "Because it's Christmas Eve. Magic is extra strong on Christmas Eve, and we only have until the last whisker appears on your cheek to untangle the mouse magic. And I've got to try to fix the mess I've made over the magic key too." He strode off, with Fritz scurrying beside him. Clara chased after them. "What happens if we don't untangle the mouse magic in time?" she said. She felt very nervous. Walter looked grim. "Well," he said quietly, "then Fritz will stay a mouse forever." Fritz was too shocked to sob, but Clara's heart thumped in her tummy, and her tummy did somersaults. This was terrible, terrible news. Fritz, her little brother, the best friend, turned into a mouse, and with no way back. Awful. "So we have to get going right now," said Walter, gesturing to Fritz to follow him. "I'm coming too," said Clara. The Nutcracker looked at her in surprise. "But it's a long journey to the Kingdom of Sweets," said Walter, "and it could be dangerous." "I don't care," said Clara, pushing her specs up. "I have to come. This is all my fault. I made Fritz come downstairs with me when he said we shouldn't, and now this has happened. So I'm going to help fix this." Walter and Fritz didn't argue. They could see how determined Clara looked. "Well, it would be nice to have someone else with us," said Walter, looking a little relieved. Clara nodded. "Now, how will we get there?" she said. "The Mouse King has stolen Bunty, and that cheese carriage looks a bit wonky." The two agreed. The falling Christmas tree had bashed the carriage, and it didn't look like it would get them to the front door, let alone the Kingdom of Sweets. "We'll have to go on foot," said Walter. He pointed to the hole in the skirting board where the Mouse King and his soldiers had burst in from earlier. "OK," said Clara firmly, and she took Fritz's hand and set off on a march. The thought of an adventure to a land made entirely of sweets was jolly exciting, but she was very worried about Fritz. She gave his hand a little squeeze as Walter joined them, and together they slipped through the mouse hole and into the darkness. For several long minutes there was nothing but blackness. A cold breeze blew from way up ahead. It ruffled Clara's hair and made Fritz's new tail go all goose-pimply. Eventually there was a glimpse of moonlight which got bigger and bigger as they approached the end of the tunnel. They clambered out and looked around in amazement. Clara and Fritz had expected to find themselves outside their house on Knickerbock Avenue, but instead they were in a thick woodland. In every direction, as far as they could see, there were hundreds of thousands of spindly, barely branched trees and tangly knots of thorny brambles. Clara and Fritz were still very tiny, so everything loomed high above them. They wandered out into the clearing. Once more, Clara felt the strange, prickling, itchy sensation that she was being watched, but in the gloom it was hard to see if anyone was there or not. And as she heard a twig snap somewhere nearby, she wasn't sure, but she shook herself and asked the Nutcracker where they were. "This is the deep, dark woods, and that," he said, pointing through the little gap in the trees, "is Scrumptious Valley. The Sugar Plum Fairy lives right over there on Marshmallow Mountain." Clara squinted into the distance. Across the wide valley she could just about make out the shape of a tall mountain with a large glittering palace at its peak. She groaned. Even if she and Fritz had been their normal height, the journey would have taken them ages. How they'd get there before morning, the size they were, she didn't know, but they'd simply have to. They had to rescue the key, and they had to save Fritz from his mousy fate. Her tummy twisted again nervously. "Come on then, slow coaches," she said, trying to sound jollier than she felt. "We must get going," and set off.